Hello, thank you all for joining us. We're going to let everybody continue to join in and we'll get started in just a minute. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm Jamie Beck, and I'm the President and Managing Attorney of Free to Thrive. You know, people are still joining in. I'm watching as people are jumping on. I'm going to give it just a second more, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're here to talk about the impact of COVID on human trafficking victims and survivors. We're going to do our very best to keep this to an hour, so we're going to go ahead and jump right in. So first, just want to take a moment to do a few small housekeeping items. First, if you have your settings on the right-hand side of your Zoom, set it to speaker view if you can. And if you know how to do in your Zoom settings to hide non-video participants, that way you'll only see the person who's talking. If you don't know how to do that, don't worry about it. Also, if you have any technical issues, please contact Elaine, our training coordinator. Her contact info is here. And just so you know, if you are participating, we cannot see you. You are muted. So if you're joining us in your PJs, that's totally fine. Thank you for being here and being a part of this. And finally, you can use the Q&A chat function. We're going to answer questions at the end of this training, but you can ask your questions at any time in the Q&A chat box. It should be either at the top or bottom of your screen. And we look forward to answering those at the end. So this has been a really crazy time for all of us. So in order for us to be here present for this next hour, I want to encourage us all to just take a moment and take a deep breath. If it's available to you, close your eyes, and if not, lower your gaze and just take a long, slow inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth. All right, let's begin. Our speakers today are myself, Jamie Beck, Grace Barron, Nick Moore, Susie Day, and Dion Sales McKinney, all of whom work with me at Free to Thrive. And we're each going to be talking about what we're seeing during this pandemic, what we expect to see going forward, and how we're helping our clients through this. For those of you who are not familiar with Free to Thrive, we empower human trafficking survivors to be free from exploitation and thrive by providing them with legal services and connections to other support. We do this through our mobile legal clinic, which we operate in various locations throughout San Diego County. So we provide on-site legal services at social service providers, residential treatment programs, and in jail, particularly at our women's detention facility here in San Diego. We are a San Diego-based organization, but we do have clients around the country with legal needs in San Diego, and we have partners that we work with around the country to help survivors in their own communities. We're going to be focused on what we are seeing here in San Diego, but we've been speaking with our partners around the country about what they've been seeing, and not surprisingly, they're seeing very similar things in their own communities. So while this is focused on what we're seeing at Free to Thrive, we really are seeing similar things around the country. And if you want to learn more about that, we did co-author a blog with a number of our community partners around the country, which can be found on Free to Thrive's website. And we're also going to put that in the Q&A chat box for you as well. And I encourage you to check that out to learn more about the impact that this is having on survivors nationwide. So I mentioned that we operate our mobile legal clinic. In the wake of COVID, we began serving our clients virtually, and really we've continued to operate and help our clients through this crisis. And we've done that by meeting with clients virtually as opposed to in person. And we've also launched a new program called Steer, which you're going to hear about at the end of this training. So we have a lot of experts from around the country who are joining us today who know so much about this issue. We're going to spend just a minute on some basic human trafficking 101 for anybody who is not familiar with this issue or less familiar. Keep in mind that could be an entire 1 hour or full day training, so know that you're getting just a very high level of what this issue is. So human trafficking is exploiting another person for purposes of sex or labor by means of force, fraud, or coercion. It also is a commercial sex act involving a minor. The reason for a minor, there does not need to be force, fraud, or coercion because they can't consent to engage in commercial sex. What makes human trafficking different from other sex crimes is that there are, if we think about crimes like rape or sexual assault, those crimes involve two parties, the victim and the perpetrator. When we're talking about human trafficking, there's the victim, there's the perpetrator who's perpetrating the human trafficking of trafficking that person for sex or labor. And then there's the buyer. We're talking about commercial sex. It's the person who's buying sex either through prostitution or through illicit massage or other means of buying commercial sex. And for exploited labor, it's somebody who's buying the the labor. Another thing is that oftentimes people conflate human trafficking with human smuggling, which is a completely different crime. Bringing somebody illegally across a border is human smuggling. If you look at this definition, there actually is no requirement that somebody cross a border. So somebody could be trafficked in your city and never leave that city, and that's still human trafficking. A couple quick facts. In San Diego, 80% of sex trafficking victims are from the United States. Now that's pretty consistent with the numbers that we see from studies around the country. And a lot of people are surprised to hear that because there's a very common misconception that victims of sex trafficking are brought to the United States and trafficked here. And while we're talking about labor trafficking, it is far more likely that the victims are from other countries. But when we talk about sex trafficking, it's predominantly people that are from the US who are being trafficked. And the average age into sex trafficking is 16 to 18 years old. Another thing to remember is that, oftentimes when I tell people the work that we do here in San Diego, they say, oh, it's because you're close to the border. And yeah, we are close to the border, and that does factor into what it looks like here in San Diego. But the reality is that human trafficking is everywhere. If you look at this map, this is the Polaris heat map. Polaris runs a national human trafficking hotline, and we have some folks from Polaris on here, and thanks so much for joining us. This map shows where calls into this national hotline are coming from around the country. And as you can see, the vast majority of the United States has human trafficking. In fact, if you dug a little bit deeper in that map, I'm willing to bet that anywhere that doesn't have that, any sort of trafficking going on is probably land or very rural areas. And even there may be trafficking happening. We're going to talk a little bit about grooming, and I just want to make sure we know what we're talking about. Grooming is the process of preparing somebody to traffic them. It can happen in many different ways. People may use love and affection or isolation or threats of violence, but it's like a pre-trafficking of somebody getting ready to exploit them. So what does human trafficking look like during COVID? Well, the reality is that in some ways we really don't know and probably won't know for a very long time. But what we do know about is all the vulnerabilities that make somebody more vulnerable to being trafficked. And we know that there has been an increase in those vulnerabilities in our society, and globally there's been an increase. We've seen an increase in job loss and economic hardship, and that's really going to result in increased homelessness and displacement. And those economic hardships make people more vulnerable to being trafficked. Just since the outbreak of COVID, we've already received a referral of a client who had been working at a restaurant and then was exploited when they lost their job working at a restaurant. Somebody said, "You can work in my home as a domestic worker," and then exploited them for their labor. And that's something that we anticipate seeing a lot more of people who are working in an industry where they lost their job and can't work in that industry anymore. And then somebody takes advantage of them and promises them work, promises them a place to live or some sort of support in some way, and then exploits them. Now, what makes labor trafficking different from a labor violation of, a wage and hour violation, for example, is, a wage and hour violation is something like I worked over 40 hours in a work week or 8 hours in a day and I didn't get paid overtime, or I didn't get paid minimum wage. Labor trafficking is more than just that. It's really exploitative labor. If somebody is living with their employer and cannot come and go from their place of work, if they lose their job, if they leave and they say, "You know what, I don't want to work under these conditions," if they leave that place of work, they're also leaving the roof over their head. And their employer knows that and is maybe taking advantage of them, having them work very long hours under very difficult working conditions, regardless of what industry they're working in. Oftentimes, employers who are trafficking their employees might take their documentation from them, taking their passport or their visa or their ID, and making it impossible for them to leave because they can't leave without those documents. And the working conditions are under labor trafficking is more than just, "Oh, I didn't get paid my overtime." It's often very harsh and difficult labor that they're doing. Another thing that we are seeing, unfortunately, is that there is an increase in grooming and online recruitment of children. Just today, I saw an article. I'm actually going to pull it up real quick so I can show you this. I literally just got this about, 10 minutes before this started, that in Virginia, 30 men were arrested for soliciting minors for online sex. And this is something that we already anticipated this was going to happen, because one of the vulnerabilities, or one of the ways people that are often trafficked, unfortunately, is through the internet. So kids that are on gaming apps or on social media who are recruited online by traffickers. And right now, kids are at home with more access to the internet than ever before. Their parents may be trying to work from home while homeschooling their kids and doing everything else that they're trying to do through this crisis, or they may be in one of the essential industries and they may be working while their kids are at home. And with that access to the internet that may not be supervised by their parents, that's what traffickers are looking for, like those traffickers who were arrested. And the reality is that all kids are at risk. The kids that are more at risk are the kids who may not have a good home environment. Think about kids who are in an abusive or neglectful home, whose school was really their outlet, their way of getting out of that environment and being in a different environment. Well, those kids are now at home 24/7 in that environment, and they're going to be really susceptible to a trafficker who grooms them, like what I was talking about, of saying, "You know what, you don't have to be under those, you don't have to live like that, and your parents don't love you, I love you." Just using manipulation to get them to maybe meet up with them, befriending them, and just acting like they care about them. And that's really the risk that we're seeing with kids, and that's exactly what this article was talking about. And finally, college and transition age youth are also really vulnerable. So think about, all college kids, colleges are closed and most of them were sent home. And if they have a home to go to, their parents are putting food on the table and supporting them through this while they hopefully are doing school online. But think about the kids who may not have a good home environment to go back to. If they're returning to an abusive or neglectful home that they were able to get out of by going to college, they're just like those kids who are in that situation who are going to be more susceptible to being trafficked. And then there's a lot of young adults who are supporting themselves, particularly our former foster youth who went off to college or who were working in some of the industries that were shut down, industries like restaurants or working as baristas or working in retail. Those young people lost their jobs or they are not getting paid right now during this time. And they were supporting themselves, using that money to eat and pay rent. And now they don't have a source of income. And traffickers are going to use that and say, just using internet or people that they're already in touch with and using social media to lure them in and say, I love you, I'll support you, or hey, I know a way you can make some quick cash. And unfortunately, illicit sex is still happening even during this crisis, and people are going to be exploited through that. We don't know how long it's going to take to really see and understand this. So it may be that people are being groomed right now, and that could take days or weeks, but it could also take months or years. And we may see people getting groomed right now, and we may see an uptick in trafficking later, or there may be people that are going to be trafficked during this time, but we may not hear about it, or they may not reach out for help for a very long time. So I think it's going to be a while till we fully know at an academic level what has happened, but certainly those of us who are in this space who are receiving calls of people who've been trafficked during this crisis and who know just the vulnerabilities that lead to trafficking. This is based on what we know about this population and this issue. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Grace Barron, who's going to talk about the criminal justice impacts on our survivors.
Thanks, Jamie. So I'm Grace Barron. I'm a staff attorney and coordinator of Free to Thrive's criminal justice program. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the effect COVID has had on incarcerated individuals. So to put this into context, you might be asking, why are human trafficking victims and survivors incarcerated? Actually, many human trafficking victims and survivors are currently in jail and prison for crimes related to their exploitation. We actually meet about 25% of our clients for the first time in jail. We work with clients who are in custody to advocate for them in their criminal cases and also to support them upon release. So to help to make sure that they have a release plan and that they're able to access resources once they are released. So some of the things that we're seeing right now are increased isolation. Just like all of us are experiencing more isolation with these lockdown orders, being told that we have to stay home, we can't see family members. It's really been enhanced for people who are currently incarcerated. Usually people are able to go to programming, they have different classes, skills, different jobs they're able to do inside of these facilities, and programming has completely stopped. Social visits have stopped, so if you did have a family or friend who came and saw you regularly, you're not able to see them in person anymore. Most people are getting little to no contact from their attorneys. We're doing calls over the phone, and that's pretty much what most attorneys are doing right now. It's just less personable, but it's one way that you can at least stay in contact is through those phone calls. We've also, unfortunately, seen the increased use of isolation cells for people who are exhibiting COVID-19 symptoms. This is necessary to combat the spread of the virus in these populations that are very close together with so many people who are vulnerable, but we also know that periods of isolation are very harmful to individuals. So it's a very frustrating time to see these facilities having to bet on the lesser of two evils in these situations. We're also seeing that court dates have been postponed. So pretty much all jury trials in California have been suspended until May 22nd. There's word in San Diego that might be pushed past Memorial Day, but no official word on that yet. So that's that suspension of right to speedy trial. A lot of people, if you're in custody and not eligible for early release, you don't know when your trial is going to be heard, and you don't know even when your next court date is to be ready for your jury trial. So it can be very anxiety inducing for people who are incarcerated right now. Push for early release. So we're seeing a big push for early release, which is good. We want to limit the jail and prison population so that the virus doesn't affect as many people, because in these populations it can spread very quickly. it's really just an ideal breeding ground for this type of virus. So California has a new bail schedule in effect that sets bail at $0 for misdemeanors and for nonviolent felonies. There's some exceptions, like for domestic violence. And there's actually 13 specific exceptions within the emergency rules, which you can find on the California court's website. CDCR has done what they call an expedited release plan. So if people had 60 days or less to serve on their sentence, they're actually eligible to be released early right now. So that's at the state prison level. At our local detention facilities, we're seeing that the DAs and the public defenders are working together to identify people who are what they call medically fragile or vulnerable to complications from COVID-19. So basically, once they identify someone as medically fragile, they're working to make sure that they have a release plan. This means that they have somewhere to go. So we don't want people to be released from prison with no housing, no resources. And organizations like ours, and probably a lot of yours, can actually help public defenders with that release planning and making sure what organizations are open right now, what organizations can provide housing and food and those types of resources. This is creating, early release is good for some of our clients who are currently incarcerated who might be eligible for early release, but it can create a mix of emotions because it also means that some of their traffickers might be getting released early. Some of them may be 2 months earlier than we were expecting. And now just trying to deal with how we're going to work with safety planning and handling that anxiety of knowing this person is back out. So now I'm going to move on to difficult conditions upon release. So when you're released from jail or prison, a lot of times you have conditions like you need to go to a work program to find employment, or you need to go to therapy or start different classes. And a lot of these programs just aren't functioning right now. If they are functioning, a lot of them are only seeing current clients and they aren't taking on new clients. So we're working really hard to find out which organizations are still working and are taking new clients right now. We've had a few clients released during the outbreak, and we've been able to ensure that they have safely transitioned to housing. One of our clients needed clothing. They didn't have any clothing after they were released. And one of our superstars, Dion, who you'll hear from later, was able to get them clothes within a few days of their release. For probation and parole, what we're seeing is that both are still operating, but their services are modified. POs are working remotely. Some have suspended drug testing and other check-ins. What I've heard from clients is that they've been calling in, trying to figure out if their check-in date's still happening or if it's changing to a phone check-in date. I had a client who called in to ask, and they actually were able to do her check-in on the day she called. They're also being told that the probation officer will reach out to them next month. So it's going to be an in-person visit or a telephone check-in. I understand the need for this because probation and parole doesn't know if their offices are going to be open, but it can cause a lot of anxiety for people who, you don't want to miss your probation check-in, but you don't know when you're supposed to check in with probation. So we're really encouraging our clients to keep reaching out to the probation officers, stay in contact with them. If your probation or parole officer knows you're in contact with them, that's the best way to protect yourself from being like a no-show with a check-in. If you're unable to reach your probation or parole officer, we've actually been able to reach out to probation and parole officers. We had a client whose parole officer was requiring them to come do a drug testing check-in. But this client didn't have transportation. Public transportation has pretty much stopped. This client was immunocompromised, has an upcoming surgery, so they really shouldn't be going out into the public places right now. And our team was actually able to talk to the parole officer and work on suspending that testing until after the surgery. So there are a lot of probation officers and parole officers understand all the complications that are happening right now with COVID-19. So just constant communication with them for your clients and on behalf of your clients will really help protect everyone in this situation. What Free to Thrive is doing to help in custody clients. So right now, like I said, it's a lot of uncertainty for everyone, especially for people who are incarcerated because they don't have the same access to information that the rest of us have. And a lot of them may not fully understand the situation outside of the four walls. So a lot of people who are currently incarcerated might not realize that a lot of people have lost their jobs, that a lot of people are struggling with food, housing, resource instability. So any information that we can provide to those clients to sort of let them have some sense of certainty or know what's going on with court dates, for example, or if the court has new closure information, that just eases a little bit of anxiety. So we've been emailing those updates. I'm sending handwritten letters, making phone calls with in-custody clients to give those updates. We're also working closely with public defenders, like I said, for those release plans. If people are going to be released early, we want to make sure that they're supported upon release. And we've been helping clients transition in and out of custody and access those services, whether it's food, clothing, housing. We've also been reaching out to transitional housing organizations to see who's taking new clients right now, because I mean, housing is always a need. It's really been enhanced during this crisis, and a lot of programs aren't able to take on new people because of safety precautions. So just figuring out what resources are out there and what resources are still functioning. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick Moore, who heads up our family justice program.
Thank you, Grace. My name is Nicholas Moore. I am the senior staff attorney at Free to Thrive and the family justice program manager. And I'm going to talk to you about how COVID-19 is impacting family law and in particular domestic violence cases. The first thing that I want to talk about is just data in general, and that is domestic violence data is incredibly difficult to get. We know it's underreported. We know that there are a number of factors that contribute to it being underreported. There have been a lot of articles recently about a surge in domestic violence calls globally. We are seeing cities across the globe report double-digit increases in the number of domestic violence calls they're receiving. Interestingly, in San Diego, the Voice of San Diego published an article indicating that 911 calls over the last 3 weeks in San Diego County for domestic violence has actually decreased by almost 20%. This data, again, it's just hard to get, and we don't know what to make of this data. But what we do know is that a situation like in California, where there is a stay-at-home order in place, that these types of moments exacerbate the circumstances that keep victims with abusers. We know that it takes a victim, on average, 7 attempts to leave their abuser. And that's not 7 times thinking about it. That's not 7 plans being formed. It's 7 times of actually taking concrete steps to attempt to leave their abuser before they successfully end up leaving. What we also know about this situation is that with schools closed, there is the children at home, and there are now more children witnesses to domestic violence happening. And for those not familiar with this area of family law, children witnessing domestic violence is a form of child abuse. And really what this stay-at-home order is doing in California and other states is it's kind of creating a perfect storm for abusers, because domestic violence, as we know, is all about power and control. And there's a pretty broad spectrum of the types of abuse that can happen in a domestic violence situation. Particular to human trafficking victims, one of the things that is generally misunderstood is that a lot of trafficking is not like the movie Taken, where it's a pretty white girl abducted in a foreign country. A lot of trafficking involves very intimate relationships between the trafficking victim and their trafficker. Sometimes that results in marriage, and sometimes that results in kids. And unwinding these emotionally complicated and exploitive situations can be a very long process and can be a very difficult process. One of the things that tends to happen in these cases where children are involved is there are a lot of unclear circumstances as to how to go about visitation exchanges. So for example, parents are withholding visitation and they're unsure of how to share custody, and police aren't going to enforce a visitation order unless that visitation order is directly tied to a domestic violence restraining order that is actively being violated. Courts in San Diego have given the following guidance, and that is if a concerned non-custodial parent is concerned about the transmission of COVID-19 into their household, they can forego visitation. But courts are not willing to consider this circumstance as a makeup time. However, courts will consider the failure to exchange children as a factor when making new orders when operations resume. As of right now, court operations in San Diego are restricted to all but emergency services. And this can kind of have a chilling effect on victims. So restraining orders are still able to be filed, but the court-based clinics that many people rely upon to file these restraining orders are closed. Some of those providers may be operating remotely, But we also have in San Diego the Family Justice Center, and that physical location is for the most part closed down, but thankfully still doing on-site forensic medical examinations and emergency protective orders. And emergency protective orders, for those unfamiliar, are orders that the police department will assist a victim in getting from a judge. Normally they only last 5 days, which is enough time to get a civil domestic violence restraining order. But per the California Judicial Council, those orders are now extended 30 days. Really, though, what's happening in our courts is everything is delayed. And there's an old legal maxim that says that justice delayed is justice denied. So an emergency for the court is very different than an emergency for our clients. And dates for everything that is not labeled an official statutory emergency are being delayed. This includes delays for hearings on support, custody and visitation modification, divorce filings, and judgments, including the award of sanctions. For example, I have one client who, after a particularly contentious DV and custody trial, she won full custody, and the judge sanctioned her abusive ex-husband $10,000 and sanctioned the lawyer $15,000. I can't file that judgment. I can't get that judgment and get that money to our client until the courts reopen for normal filings. And that's a pretty tough pill for people to swallow, especially in a time of such great uncertainty. One of the other things that we're seeing is that we are absolutely anticipating an increase in divorces. Hong Kong went into a lockdown and quarantine in 2002 due to the SARS outbreak then. What psychologists who studied that situation found was year over year, there's a 25% increase in the divorce rate in Hong Kong, and that a lot of the psychological trauma, and make no mistake about it, in this lockdown mode, we are all experiencing trauma. But psychologists found that the effects of this trauma persisted long after the lockdown ended. And so we're anticipating some more filings on the way. And there's really no guidance right now from the courts in how they're going to prioritize those filings. We know that civil cases are on hold and family law cases are on hold, and 30,000 divorces get filed in San Diego County every year. How the court is going to process the deluge of filings that are impending at this point, we just don't have an idea. But there are a number of things that we are doing to help. And the first is periodic welfare checks and safety planning. We are calling all of our clients every week. And if you are a family law attorney, I think it is incumbent on you to talk to your client about their current custody schedule and what they think the custody schedule may look like in the future in times of uncertainty with unemployment and no idea when schools will open again. I think that all parties and their representation should be talking about whether or not the current custody schedule is still feasible and seeing areas where they can try and find some agreement, because it's not a unique situation to human trafficking victims. It's a situation that is broadly affecting everybody with a child custody order. We are also still filing temporary restraining orders and emergency custody orders. Picture on the right is me in a face mask that my wife made in a normally very robust and very busy hallway in a northern San Diego County courthouse. It was just completely empty. But courts are still issuing these orders. They're doing it in a pretty timely fashion. What's happening, though, is the hearing dates for those orders are being pushed out. Again, though, the best thing that a family law attorney can do in times like this is try and do some real long-term planning and let clients know what their options are in the event they have unexpected circumstances arise, such as unemployment, financial struggles. We are actively trying to coordinate all of our clients to resources that are available. And to talk a little bit more about that and the resiliency of a lot of our clients is Dion Sales McKinney, our client liaison.
I think it's...
Good afternoon.
Oh, sorry.
This is
Susie.
Susie.
I am sorry about that, Susie.
No worries. Good afternoon, everyone. And I am Susie Day, Director of Development and Survivor Empowerment Programs here at Free to Thrive. And I'm going to speak a little bit about the importance of supporting trafficking survivors with their emergency needs in order to help what we refer to as prevent regressive crisis. And also what we are doing at Free to Thrive to help our clients get them through this very difficult time. I first want to start out by saying that survivors of trafficking are the most resilient, inspiring, courageous people you will ever meet. If anyone is going to get through this crisis, they are. I'm reminded of a quote from Brené Brown that vulnerability is the path to courage. Victims and survivors of human trafficking are among the most vulnerable populations in our community, and they are especially vulnerable now to all the negative impacts of the COVID-19 crisis. Free to Thrive survivor clients include homeless individuals, current and formerly incarcerated women, LGBTQ+ individuals, current and former foster youth, victims and survivors, as Nick mentioned, of domestic violence, individuals with mental and cognitive disabilities, all of whom are extremely vulnerable to being trafficked. Victims and survivors of any type of trauma are at an increased risk of facing serious setbacks and suffering regressive crisis. And those setbacks now, with the COVID-19 pandemic, are seriously exacerbated. This is especially true for our clients who are now more than ever experiencing issues like food insecurity, homelessness, mental health issues, substance abuse, lack of childcare, financial hardship due to unemployment, and even domestic violence. These issues, even for survivors that are further along their journey of healing and on the road to independence, can increase their chances of being re-exploited or going back to the life. Next slide. At Free to Thrive, we are committed to be here for our clients during and most importantly after the COVID crisis, when we begin what will be for all of us the new normal. We expect that in the next 3 to 6 months, there will be a sharp increase in the number of survivors in need of supportive services, and more importantly, resource navigation, due to the fact that more people, as Jamie kind of mentioned at the beginning, are being trafficked as they find themselves in very desperate circumstances. We find that the most critical needs moving forward will be housing, job opportunities, mentorship, legal services focused more on landlord-tenant disputes, and also debt collection. And of course, mental health services will be more important than ever to ensure the stability survivors need to be successful. You will hear more about what you can do to help a little later from Dion, but if there's anything that you can do or you want to help in regards to those specific needs I just mentioned, we really do hope that you will reach out to us and let us know. In the area of mental health, we are excited to announce that soon, along with several community partners, Free to Thrive will be supporting survivors with a multitude of mental health services, many of which will be mobile. The good news, we like to have good news, in regards to all of these needs is that there's an enormous amount of support, enormous amount of services, resources, and just in general, people who want to help. But for example, if a survivor all of a sudden finds themselves homeless, they need help now. They don't have to navigate through all the available information. They need someone to guide them. And most importantly, they need to just know that someone is there for them. Our team at Free to Thrive knew that we needed to fill that gap to help meet their emergency needs and prevent regressive crisis. And so with that, our STEER program was launched. STEER, which stands for Survivors of Trafficking Essential Emergency Resources, provides personalized, holistic, and trauma-informed one-on-one emergency resource guidance to help human trafficking survivors in Southern California navigate available resources to support not only their needs, but also the needs of their entire family. Resources include, but are not limited to, the following: food and assistance, housing, legal services like emergency custody and orders that you heard about from Nick, teletherapy, and an area of major focus for us has been ensuring that all of our clients that are eligible do what is needed to receive their federal stimulus checks. So we've been helping them file tax returns, fill out forms, whatever it is that they need to do, even just informing them about the stimulus checks, whatever it is to help them ensure that they get that funding. So you might ask, why is one-on-one support critical to a survivor of trafficking? Well, for any of us, navigating through loads of information and resources can be an extremely overwhelming, stressful, and difficult process. If you add in trauma that many of victims and survivors have experienced, it then can become an impossible process. And so much so that sometimes we might see a survivor not follow through, they might just give up, or worse, they may not seek help at all. Our program, and I should say our team, is critical to also making sure we assess their needs and break down all the barriers to access life-changing resources while still providing emotional support to them and their families, with the ultimate goal always being providing them with the tools they need to empower them during these really challenging and uncertain times. We have already seen firsthand the positive impact of the STEER program from many of our clients. To date, we have assisted 57 survivors with 116 emergency needs. I will let Dion Sales McKinney, our amazing client liaison, tell you more about what these specific needs have been and how we at Free to Thrive are helping them with those needs. Dion?
Good afternoon, all. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dion Sales McKinney, and I have the unique privilege of being the client liaison. So I get to connect with our clients on a regular basis to just check in with them. Nick mentioned that we do wellness checks, and that's on a regular basis, touching base with them on the different issues that come up. You lose your job. You're not thinking about food. You're not thinking about housing. You're not thinking about clothing. You're thinking about, I just lost my job. I've been working on getting a job because I've had a record for some time, and now I have this job and I just lost it. In the words of Dr. King, it says, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? I ask myself daily, how can I help our clients get through this temporary but chaotic season in life? And one of the ways that it's most important for us to do that is figure out a way to help them thrive in this season. Not last season or the future season, but this season. I think about that in the terms of being focused on the effort of the wellness check. When we call to check in on them to ask them, how are you today? What's going on? A client may say, oh, I'm good. I will ask them, what does good mean? What does good look like? Because they don't want to be a burden. And we have to remind them, you're not a burden. You are our client, and your concerns are our concerns. Once I've had a chance to connect with them, I check with them to see what kind of services they need. Housing, clothing, employment, food. We have a client that had tested positive for coronavirus. The most important thing to her was that she didn't lose her belongings. So we had to connect with the place she was staying in before and to secure her belongings. And once we were able to let her know her belongings are secured, she was able to focus on getting well. While that might not be an issue for some of us, it is a concern of a client that any changes creates additional trauma that they've already experienced. And then it's very important for us to work on equipping them, finding out what resources are available, how they can get the resources, making sure we're communicating to them the deadline on getting the resources, and follow up. Because sometimes things might pop up and they forget. But the wellness check-ins are very essential to them in helping them know that they're not alone. And then it is very, very important that we empower them. And in empowering them, it's just reminding them how resilient they are and reminding them what they've done to get to this point. And that this was the situation that they find themselves in now is not because of something they did, but this is something that is infecting and impacting our entire community. Imagine a city with every place that promotes social connection is closed. No school, no churches, no courts, no movies, all of this. While some of us, it is not being a big deal, others, our client, feel isolated, abandoned, restricted, rejected, and that leads to them being vulnerable. So it's very important that we check in on them to make sure that they don't feel isolated or abandoned, and that they're reminded that this is just a temporary situation, but they have support. Every day, our clients need to know to be focused on their future, focused on being determined to get past this, and being hopeful. How can we help them be hopeful? We do that by letting them know that there are services and resources available to them, and what those resources are, and how we can connect them. If they don't have transportation, that means we drive the clothing to them. If they have recently lost their job, for us to provide them with the information that they need, and also follow up with them, reminding them, because they have come back from trauma and they may have never had a job. So they really don't know how to navigate or understand, oh, you need to follow up, or you need to do this, or you need to do this. It's not a natural thing for them. So I have the unique privilege of being able to connect with them on those levels. We have been in a position where we have several community partners that have helped us along this journey. We have clients that have food insecurity, so we have directed them to reach out to Feeding San Diego, and they have locations throughout San Diego and different times, and trying to help them navigate that. We also have a clothing resource, community partner, Sharia's Closet, and we have relied on them for clients that have just got out of jail, clients that have children that have outgrown their clothes, clients that are sick with coronavirus and had to be quarantined and didn't have anything, clients that have newborn babies that need diapers and milk. The list goes on and on. It's scary, the kind of life that we're in, but it is affecting our community as a whole. And it is leaving our client population very vulnerable. There are opportunities for you to get involved. You say, what can I do? One of the things that you can do is practice empathy. Empathy is simply being concerned about someone else. When you go to the grocery store and you are able to purchase your food and you see a little gift card right on the side, purchase one and mail it to us. A lot of times people think, oh, I only have $25 to donate. Oh, I don't have much. Get your group of friends that you know are well off and would like to do something, not just sit around at their house and say, I wish. Well, the wish can come true. Send a gift card to Free to Thrive. Also, educate others. Once this webinar is over, we're going to send you a link, and you're going to be able to share that on your social media and to your friends and let them know what you've heard today. We hope that something you've received today will inspire you to know that you're not alone, but there is someone who is very vulnerable at this time. And if you could just send a gift card of a grocery card, a gas card, a Target card, a Walmart card, or feel free to reach out to us and ask what kind of needs are pressing at that time. You could also share employment opportunities. We're not going to hear about every company that is hiring at this time, but you will. Simply send us a quick email saying, hey, these people are hiring, and we will do the legwork on finding what the requirements are and things like that to get that to our clients. Donating to nonprofits, helping survivors. The survivors are already struggling with their own issues and things that have happened to them. And this particular situation is overwhelming. But I'm thankful that we're in a position that we are there for them and doing consistent wellness check. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie, who will tell you how nonprofits can partner with us to continue this effort.
Thank you so much, Deanna, and thank you to all my colleagues for sharing what you've learned through this and for all the work you're doing to support our clients. We have a lot of people that work on nonprofits, leaders of nonprofits on this webinar, which we are thrilled to see, and we wanted to connect with you. We want to partner with you. If we are not already connected, please send us your contact information. Let us know who you serve, the geographic area that you're operating in, and any other information you want to share. You'll have our contact information coming up shortly. Because we get calls from all over the place. So survivors may find our organization through any means, and they may be somewhere else. And knowing that you exist and can help is amazing, because then we can connect them to you. And work together to support our clients through this crisis. Also, we want you to take what you've learned today and replicate it to help survivors in your community. If there's something about the STEER program or just our model of services that is something that you would like to incorporate, please reach out to me, and I'm happy to share with you whatever I can about how we're operating and how we're serving our clients. I will say that this feels like building a plane while flying it at the same time. And that's really what we're all doing right now, is we're all trying to adapt to this world that we're in and figure out how can we best serve our clients through this crisis, and what is the new normal look like? What's going to happen in the future, and thinking forward to, okay, well, if our clients having these challenges now, what is that going to look like in 3 to 6 months? So we want to learn from you just as much as you're learning from us right now. And so we want to connect with you and work together to help our clients. So, and finally, the blog that I referenced at the beginning was written by a group called the National Survivor Law Collective. We have just formed. We're all founders of organizations that provide legal services to human trafficking survivors, and we're all working together to connect, to share information, to support our clients, to share resources, share what we're learning, and we want you to be a part of it. So if you are a legal focused organization that works with survivors of human trafficking, we will be disseminating more information about that soon. So keep on our social media, which I'm going to show you right now, and just stay in touch with us. And if you're interested in learning about that Survivor Law Collective, you can reach out to me and we'll put your name down as we launch this. We're still getting up and running. So here are all of our social media handles. We're going to be disseminating information, not just about things that we're doing and seeing, but resources. We're trying to use social media to directly reach victims and survivors, or people who are vulnerable, so that they don't experience trafficking. And a great way to do that is social media. So please follow us on social media, and so that you can share that information with others. And here is all of the speakers today, all of our contact information, and kind of our area of focus. So feel free to reach out to us directly through these email addresses. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick, who's going to moderate our Q&A. It looks like we already have a lot of questions, which is great. And we've got a couple more minutes. I know we're available to stay longer. If you have to jump off, we understand, but we do have about 6 more minutes, but we'll stay and answer questions beyond that if they're still there. So Nick.
All right, thank you, Jamie. And thank you to everybody in attendance and for the wonderful questions. Want to start out, Seth asks a particularly interesting question and talks about underground subcultures, such as sex slavery. And these are instances in which there is a contract and the contract ostensibly provides some sort of legal coverage. And There's no easy answer to these types of situations. Any case really is and requires analysis on a case-by-case basis. What we do know about contracts is there are certain rights that you cannot contract away. But to the extent this type of sex slave contracting wouldn't be necessarily considered a form of human trafficking, unless there is the involvement of a third party, which would then get involved in, I believe it was Andrea's question. It's hard to say, like in America, we have the freedom to contract. And you know, we are cognizant of the fact that there are voluntary sex workers and that there are people that voluntarily enter contracts and sometimes would even voluntarily enter what might seem to be an exploitive contract. And know full well that it is an exploitive contract. And we're really getting into the nuance of exploitation when we talk about these types of things. So I'm sorry that there's not a more direct and easy answer to that. Andrea, the definition of human trafficking does not require the presence of a third party. The definition of human trafficking is a commercial sex act obtained through fraud, force, or coercion. However, the presence of the third party is one of those factors that would make it more apparent that it is trafficking. So I hope that answers that question. Afra asked, due to COVID-19 and many inmates being released, are survivors and perps, survivors and perps/buyers also being released? And if so, is there any monitoring? Grace, would you like to speak to that?
Sure. So yes, survivors and perps, and if there are buyers in custody, they might be getting released early through either CDCR's plan or even nationwide. There's been a push for early release. As far as monitoring goes, there's different systems for whether it's local jail or if it's a state prison. I know for our local jail, you can sign up for Vine, and pretty much anyone can do that, and it'll like give you a text when someone's going to be released. There's certain requirements, like for the state prisons, you have to have actually been the victim of that crime as it was recorded in court. So for a lot of our clients, they weren't necessarily the victim on that case. So they aren't able to sign up for that sort of notification system that is there for victims. But a lot of custody like websites allow you to search by name for incarcerated individuals. So if I have someone who's particularly worried about one person getting out, and I'm not able to sign up for a notification system, what I do is I go on the site and I just keep checking every day to see if they're still in custody, or if usually you get a message, this person is no longer in our custody, this person's not in our custody. And so then that at least lets you know day by day who's there. Like I said, you want to know exactly when they're being released, but it does give you some more information than you'd have otherwise.
Thank you, Grace. Okay, so Tom asks a great question about a media blitz that ran in San Diego in 2016 during the Comic-Con All-Star Game, and we had it there. I do remember that. You know, one of the things that is most helpful in combating trafficking is just the awareness of it. So yes, would a media blitz help? Absolutely. But also telling people about what you've learned about trafficking, what you do in the trafficking space is helpful. In a crisis like this, there are people who are opportunists who will seek to exploit other people. And we just know that there are people out there like this. And in a crisis like this, there are people who will go out of their way to sacrifice to help other people. And crises have that way of bringing out the good and the bad in society. You know, one of the best things that we can do in lieu of another media blitz would be to just simply spread the word that there are vulnerable people out there and that people should keep their eyes open for those types of vulnerabilities.
Just one thing to add to that, Nick, it's a really good point, is supporting people with those vulnerabilities. I mean, the best thing that we can do is ensure that those who are vulnerable right now are not trafficked or exploited. And so either if you have people in your network who might fit some of those vulnerabilities that we've talked about, or if you can volunteer with an organization who supports in groups like young at-risk youth or former foster youth. I know we're connected to a number of organizations in San Diego that are working extremely hard right now, and they're working hard to keep kids and young adults safe so that they don't experience this, and organizations helping victims of domestic violence and just people who are homeless or impoverished. All those organizations need help. So there are so many different ways to get involved.
There are a few more questions to go through, but it is 1 o'clock and I do want to be respectful of everybody's time. This is being recorded, and the slides and the recording will be sent out to all attendees after the fact. So if you do have to go, please go on about your day. But a couple more great questions. Seth asks, what organizations are working actively to address the affordability of housing? And that the current crisis will likely mean even more units will wind up in the hands of investors. That's true. There's an old adage: if there's blood on the street, buy property. And so we will probably see a consolidation of property. We will probably see the largest consolidation of wealth in the history of this planet. Affordability of housing was an issue in San Diego long before this crisis. What organizations are actively working to address this? We're not aware of organizations that are actively trying to build new units. We do have partners such as North County Lifeline, Bilateral Safety Corridor, Alabaster Jar Project, Generate Hope. These are all organizations in the trafficking space that provide shelter assistance for our clients and people in this space. But it's definitely a concern.
And just to add to that, Nick, certainly just as all developers may be looking for good real estate deals right now, certainly affordable housing developers are doing the same, and hopefully that there will be, it's really incumbent on the government and our elected officials to create new incentives to incentivize creating more units. That's something that we always need, is people to build more affordable housing. I'm hearing talk about using like hotels that are, maybe the owners may be distressed and maybe looking to offload property, of converting hotels into housing for homeless people. And that is something that I really hope that happens. I'm not hoping for hotels to go under, but in the event that there are distressed properties, that they're bought and used to help people that need housing. Already in San Diego, there's a lot of hotels that are, the city is using, collaborating with hotel owners to house people that are homeless and affected by COVID. And that's something that I really hope continues after the health piece of this, the economic impact of maybe we can use some of those properties to continue to help homeless people. And certainly, and just to give a perspective, in San Diego, there are a total of 60 beds total for survivors of human trafficking. The estimate is that there's 3,000 to 8,000 victims of human trafficking in San Diego alone, and that's just sex trafficking. Labor trafficking, the estimate's about 40,000. So 60 beds and thousands of victims. We don't have enough places to house our survivors and keep them safe. And if we can't house them, it's very difficult to get them out of the situation they're in. So the more that we can create ways to house survivors and house all vulnerable people, the better. So if any of you are in industries that can help with that or are connected to your policymakers, this is a time to reach out and sit and really advocate for these types of things.
Great. Jen French asks, is there a need for more volunteer attorneys right now? Can we take on more cases even with court closures? Thank you, Jen, for asking that question, for being one of our volunteer attorneys. Absolutely, yes, we do have a need for volunteer attorneys. One of the things that we can do right now with courts being closed are what's called criminal vacature petitions. California has a very robust criminal vacature law that allows for a record to be completely cleared if we can demonstrate the causal nexus between the criminal activity and the victim's trafficking experience. And these petitions are somewhat time intensive. It requires an attorney sitting down with the victim and a survivor of trafficking and going through their story. And this can be very re-traumatizing. It takes a very gentle hand to do, but it is absolutely something that we need attorneys to help with, because we have a lot of clients that would like their records cleared. So thank you for asking that question, Jen. Afra asks if our services cover different languages at Free to Thrive. Most of our clients, the vast majority of our clients are English speakers, though we do have resources available for live translation. As lawyers, it's always important that we communicate in the language that's most comfortable to the client. They need to understand what's happening. Part of what a lawyer does is provide counsel and advice on how to apply the law to the facts of a person's situation. And that has to be done in a language that they're familiar with. You also asked if we work with refugees and asylum seekers. We do not do that right now. That is something I know that we want to get into, but that is a highly resource intensive area of law. We have a number of community partners in San Diego that do this type of work, and we try and support them in that.
Just to clarify, it's not that we don't work with them, it's that we won't work with them on those petitions. So we don't practice immigration law at Free to Thrive. We absolutely do work with people who are refugees and asylum seekers, but we would help them with other legal needs. A lot of them may have child custody or need restraining orders or need help clearing their record if they were arrested as a result of their trafficking. And so we would help them with those things.
Thank you for that clarification, Jamie. There are a couple of other great questions on here that if it's okay, I'm happy to connect with you all offline. So for example, Janice asked who are referral sources for STEER? Susie, if you want to jump in and just answer some of those sources off the top. We have a number of great community partners for that.
Sure. Nick mentioned a lot of them right now: North County Lifeline, Alabaster Jar Project, Bilateral Safety Corridor. Gosh, I'm trying to think. San Diego Youth Services. There are so many amazing organizations that we partner with. So we do get a lot of referrals for the STEER resources from them.
And we are going to be, we actually just released on our website a blog that talks about this program that Susie and I co-authored, and that actually references a number of our partners in that blog. And then on our website, we also list all of our community partners.
Always ready to get more.
Yeah, the more partners we have, the more successful this program is going to be. So if you look at that list and see organizations that are missing, I mean, that list is a San Diego focused list. Certainly we want to expand outside of San Diego, but that's our focus right now. But if you look at that list and see people or organizations that should be on there, by all means, reach out to me, reach out to Susie, and connect us to those organizations, because we want to partner with them. And we're working on building that list. That's a part of the work we're doing behind the scenes right now, is adding even more partners.
And if you even have a new need that you think that we're not addressing, obviously we're open to hearing about any types of needs that we can offer our clients.
Thank you. Jessica asks, do you only work with adults? If not, what is the age range? We work with survivors of all ages, though there are certain situations in America where you get an attorney for a particular legal situation. One is dependency court. And the other is criminal court. In the instances where which you are in a legal circumstance where you already have an attorney, our role is an advocacy type of role. Typically, in this particular space and in indigent legal services in general, the people who are the attorneys who are assigned to do this work are generally phenomenal attorneys, but they're also strapped for resources, have way too many clients, and don't necessarily have the time to sit down and explain all the nuances of the situation with a particular client. And so one of the things we try and focus on in those advocacy roles is just making sure that the client understands we're here to help, we're here to support, but really, and especially dependency court, those attorneys do this type of work day in, day out. They know the judges, they know the county councils, the Children's Legal Services Council, they know all the players involved, that sometimes it's difficult for private attorneys to come in and can actually be pretty disruptive to an otherwise efficient system. And oftentimes the most value we can provide in those circumstances would be counseling and helping the client understand the process that's going on. But there is some good studies that suggest that the average age range for somebody who is first trafficked is about 14 or 15 years old. Janice asks a great question about our experiences with client response to our efforts to stay connected during this time. Dion, would you like to answer that?
No problem. I will be happy to. Thank you, Janice, for your question. We are getting all kind of positive responses, specifically with regards to clothing, food, job opportunities that we're able to share. One of the things I wanted to share is while during this isolation, we have a client that started making face masks. We have clients that are starting to enjoy reading. So we're able to connect with our partner to obtain books for them, pajamas. Our clients are thankful. I have been in the legal field for over 25 years. And most of our clients, because of the support they're receiving from the Free to Thrive team, most of the time they're ending their calls, I love you. I love you guys. I love you guys so much. And that is just because they are feeling supported. This is a challenging time. And I just want to share that the difference between a broken community and a thriving one is when there's a presence that a person feels valued. And I believe with our consistent wellness check, calls, emails, texts, they feel valued. And for that, I am truly grateful that Free to Thrive exists.
Thank you, Dion. Caroline asked a question a little bit earlier about the definition of trafficking as it relates to a landlord-tenant type situation where a landlord is attempting to satisfy a rental obligation through a sex act. And my response is that there is the federal definition of trafficking, which doesn't require a third party to be involved. And that trafficking is the extraction of commercial sex through fraud, force, or coercion. The landlord-tenant situation is a situation that, yes, I think technically could fit the definition of trafficking. The definition of trafficking is intentionally broad, and we want it to be broad because that's what allows us to offer our services to as many people as possible. That's what allows us to apply laws such as criminal vacatur to as many people as possible. However, in that particular instance, I do think it would be defined more as exploitive than trafficking, though. I mean, this is the type of legal philosophical, argument that lawyers could have and reasonably disagree on, and judges could have and reasonably disagree on, and appellate courts could have and disagree on, as to how that necessarily fits the definition. It's something that's definitely happening. It's sickening that it does happen. Exploitation, as we know, is everywhere. But because I don't necessarily see it as trafficking isn't necessarily a reason why it couldn't be considered trafficking. And I'll say that is that reasonable people can disagree, and even in this space, people can disagree as to the extent to which it might be considered trafficking. Seth asks, has Free to Thrive connected with In-N-Out Burger? They were running an awareness campaign a while ago. Seth, that's a great question. I have not had In-N-Out Burger in a long time, and I'm really hungry now. But it's something I didn't know about, and I thank you for bringing that up because it is definitely something we're going to look into. So we
actually are a finalist for a grant from In-N-Out Burger, so everybody send your positive thoughts our way because we're waiting to hear back on that grant opportunity right now.
Great. And this is going to be our last question from Krista Walker. Hey, Krista, are you working with interns right now or for the summer remotely? Krista is one of our former interns and now doing great work at the Public Defender's Office. Yes, we are fully remote right now. We are working with a team of interns now, and we do have a summer team lined up. And our transition to remote work was pretty seamless. And that's part of because of how Free to Thrive was set up. It was designed to be a robust and agile legal services organization. So we are fully remote right now, and we have a great team of interns doing some great work. So thanks, Krista. And I think that's our last question. If there's anything that we did not answer, please, our contact information is was still up on the screen. Please feel free to send us an email or give us a phone call or reach out to us on social media. We are so happy to have so many people participating in this webinar and interested in these topics. We hope we answered your questions. And any last words, Jamie?
Just thank you all so much for taking the time to join us today and learn about this subject. We're really thrilled to be able to do this work and to be able to share what we're doing with all of you. So thank you. Please connect with us and stay safe, stay healthy. Just sending you all a great big virtual hug right now. Bye.